This is, you know what this is, right? This is that thing that yeah, Lexus did with all the book covers.
Well, welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. We had planned to start with a piece of music, but I'm not sure something's happening with our technical guru here. So I think, Jim, if it's okay with you, we'll just get started.
That's absolutely fine. Actually, wow, this is pretty fun. I never thought I would be ever doing a reading session for organ music from the library in our house. So Rachel and I are going to be talking with you all today, and I'm Jim Jordan. I am the sheet music editor at Paraclete Press, and want to welcome you all to this first in our series of Paraclete Music Talkbacks. Now, let me underscore something quickly. Talkback means exactly that. It's not that term that our parents, used to get mad at us when we were little kids about talking back, but we actually want your questions so that as we go through pieces today, we're not only listening to them, but we're talking about them because for my money, that's half the fun of doing a reading session is you're with each other, talking about it, discussing how it can be used. So I would recommend if you don't have your cup of coffee, get your cup of coffee, get your bottle of water, get your notepad, and we'll be off. First, yes.
Just to let everybody know, to submit your questions to actually talk back through this session, just take a second to find the Q&A button. For me, it's at the bottom of my screen. It looks like two quotation boxes together. You submit your questions and I'll collect them for Jim, and we'll launch as Jim's talking about the music.
Great. So I hope everybody got that nailed down, but I do want to introduce you. Met Rachel McKendry. Dan Pfeiffer and Katie Tingley are the other two people on our Zoom team who will be working with us through these productions so that you can hear all these various pieces of organ music. Actually, one of the reasons that I wanted to start today with organ music in our first of this series is because so many organists have been posting online during this time, which I have just found fabulous, frankly. For one thing, I get to hear pieces played I don't hear all that often. And also I get to see friends that I don't see very often. And as I put that note out to people to join us, I said, we really do need to do this together. It's very important. So when we get our technical up and running, next week, you'll actually see what we call a signature piece, which is Thou, O God, Art Praised in Zion by Malcolm Boyle. But for the moment, we'll go beyond that. Rachel, are you still there?
Oh, yes, I'm still here.
Okay, are we set that I can jump on into the first organ piece?
Yes, I believe we are.
Okay, well, we won't. I just want to make, okay, super. Dan, if you want to go ahead, this is a toccata on Old Hundredth by Robert Lau. And I want to explain a little bit to you what's happening today. Sometimes you're going to hear an MP3 and watch along with a PDF. Or in this case, This piece was actually part of a series we've been doing from the Church of the Transfiguration in Orleans called A Gift of Listening. And I thought it might be nice for you to see Cape Cod at this time of year. We wish. So here's the Toccata on Old Hundredth by Robert Lau. So again, that was the Toccata on Old Hundredth by Robert Lau. I have to say that's one of my favorite pieces to play on Old Hundredth. And I want to give a quick, as we call them, shout outs. As he said this morning, I was just on the phone with Robert this morning. I think he's actually one of our participants today in the webinar. And if you'll join us again next week at the same time, Robert is actually going to be my guest on the webinar. We're going to be looking at all of his works that he has published with us, choral and organ. So I thought this would be a fun way to start. The other thing is I see I've got a question here from Andrew Pester, who says, fellow composers, how and where do you find your inspiration and what is your compositional process? Andrew, it's a great question. Unfortunately, you're stuck with just me today. So what we'll do is we'll actually post that around and we'll send that out to our composers via an email and get some answers. And then join us again next week when Robert is on with us, because I know he would actually love to answer that question. He and I have talked about that many, many times, that he's one of these composers that if I call him and say, we need a piece set on Old Hundredth and it needs to last about 3 minutes, it needs to be good in the fantastic style based on the chorale. And as long as you can play the chorale and your D major scales, you're going to be good. And that's really the type of pressure he enjoys and really has done some beautiful things under that. So join us next week and we'll have Robert on as our guest. Now, as I was looking through the pieces for today, I almost wanted to call this the Robert Show, because now we're going to move on to a different Robert, and that's Robert Lind, Bob Lind, a composer out of Chicago, who was actually not only a student of Sowerby, he was Sowerby's assistant at St. James in Chicago and ultimately succeeded him there. We've had a long-standing relationship with him. I've always enjoyed his music. We do publish actually almost 30 of his pieces. One interesting set that we've got, if you go onto our website at some point and take a look, is a set called I Sing the Almighty Power of God. It was a real love affair of the heart, as he put it, to take all of the hymn tunes of Vaughan Williams and set them. Now, you're not going to hear those today. I decided today to play two different pieces out of his book entitled Organ Works for the Church Year, Manuals Only. I don't know about you all, but there's always those books that you just keep next to the organ bench that you really need to just grab something and play it quick. Then this is one of those books you can do that from. So today what you're going to hear are two works from it. First, the Voluntary on Sonne der Gerechtigkeit, which is actually at the Lamb's High Feast. You could use this for Pentecost. And then a wonderful little set of variations on Stuttgart, Come Thou Long Expected Jesus. So here are those two works from Bob Lind. And great, and now we'll move right on into the variations on Stuttgart. Or we might not. Okay, there we go. So that just shows you two of those works from that collection from Organ Works for the Church Year by Bob Lind. One thing about our collections from Paraclete, and this always gets a good laugh at a reading session, is most of us have all for years, you'll go and you'll walk in, and when we used to walk through and go through music bins, and you'll see a collection or so, and you look at the price, maybe $35, $40, 17 pieces, and you might play 2. And nobody wants to do that. So when the collections come through here, we really do take a good look at all of the pieces within the collection to see if it's something that it's a consistent quality. And of course, with somebody like Bob Lind, it automatically is. But that's the type of thing I always talk about with collections, because you're making such an investment with that score that you know you want to really get the good from all of the music that's in there. So I think it's something you actually would enjoy. I find them great fun to play. And truth be told, they don't take a long time to learn.
Jim, I just want to jump in for a second because there's a few comments here in the chat bar. For one thing, let's see, John Sabine says he plays many of Robert Lind's compositions. So that's great to hear.
Yeah, listen, thanks, John. I appreciate that. By the way, I should wish you happy birthday since we have the same birthday.
And John Spiesman says, are all these titles available from the Paraclete website? So one thing I was going to tell you at the beginning of this talk is I'm posting links in the chat bar at the side of your screen, but you'll also be receiving an email from us, a follow-up email that will have links to everything that will be easy for you to access. So if the chat bar is a little overwhelming, don't worry, you'll get links, and everything, yes, is absolutely available on the Paraclete sheet music website.
Oh, John thanked me and gave me a happy birthday wish too. Thank you. All right, let's move on to our next piece, because this is just one of my all-time favorite trumpet tunes by David Halls. David Halls is actually the composer. Well, he's more than a composer, he's a musician in residence over at Salisbury Cathedral in England. I had the privilege of meeting him back in 2007 while studying chant in England. He had been a longtime composer already with Paraclete, but to meet this man in person, oh, he'll have you in stitches, an absolutely unending sense of humor. And this particular piece combines some of that humor, both in the tune, but it really follows in the model of Elgar, Walton, where you have this marvelous march, this wonderful tune using solo trumpet, and then a middle theme that'll just melt your heart. So this is Sound the Trumpet by David Halls. Now, as Virgil Fox used to say, if you're not smiling at the end of that piece, you're seated in the wrong pew. That is one of the most exciting trumpet tunes. I just, it just makes you want to stand up and shout. First time I ever played that in church for a postlude, people they just howled out loud when they heard it, because that ending, of course, is thrilling. And from a practical standpoint, you know, for weddings, because of the structure of the piece, you can make cuts in it. I don't recommend it simply because it really does stand as a whole unto itself. We also know the reality of things like that, and so it would work well in either situation. We actually publish 29 of David's works. So if you've never looked at his music, look at that piece and go online and look at some of the other things that he's done. The marvelous collection he's done of 3 organ works, manuals only in a small collection, which are perfect really to play for one entire service. So I can't recommend him highly enough. We're going to move on now to something, another one of our videos that we did as the gift of listening that came out actually for Good Friday morning. And that's Rob Farrell's arrangement of O Sacred Head Now Wounded. It's actually quite touching. He's found a rhythm where you really do hear a heartbeat, and he's quite consistent with it, where you have an emphasis of on 1, 2, 4, 1, 2. And you get that going in the left hand against this beautiful tune. And then as he's put against it, and then ultimately the chorale entering, you know, in the long note style, taking us all the way through the entire hymn. And if you've got, you know, a nice solo diapason, that'll work, or a big flute, as well as some lovely strings. But I wrote Rob personally because I had never played this work until this year. I knew it simply because we published it, but absolutely fell in love with it. So here is O Sacred Head Now Wounded by Rob Farrell. You know, I think it's actually worth a quick quote from Rob. He said, when his music is performed, he feels as though he's doing what he was meant to do, helping to elevate the level of spirituality in the congregation. As he writes music for worship, he hopes to do the text justice, which certainly here he has done, and that it will bless the listeners with a heightened feeling of goodness, as he puts it, Godness. So I can't recommend that piece enough for you, and it's wonderful. Particularly, oftentimes we have services, you know, that run several hours on Good Friday with various places for interludes and so forth, if you have the organ being used during Holy Week, and that really is meant for right in that time period. So now I'm coming to the final organ work, and the reason I say that is because I do believe we're going to get to hear our signature piece following this. But the last organ work that we're going to do today is a setting of "O God, Our Help in Ages Past" by Lindsay Lafford. We had a long time relationship with Lindsay Lafford at Paraclete Press, have a number of his works in print, and actually his son and his daughter are on with us today, which is delightful to have them here as part of this webinar. We have stayed in touch over these years. It's actually quite wonderful how they still support the work of what their father did and keeping his music alive and out there. And they have been extraordinarily generous with us in helping us to do that. This setting of "O God, Our Help in Ages Past" is entitled Fanfare, Recitative, and Hymn for unison voices, organ, and congregation, with unison voices and congregation being optional. Now, I know all that sounds a little funny, but it's really not. This works extremely well as either an organ piece, which is how you'll hear it now, or a few years ago, I did this for a reading session for an AGO chapter, and that AGO chapter just raised the roof on the last 4 verses, because there's nothing like someone who's British to know how to use British harmonies. And it is extraordinary the way he colors this piece. So you really do get fanfare motives, you get a beautiful quiet recitative, and then, as it were, you get a hymn introduction, and then the verses of the hymn building up to full organ at the end. So this is "O God, Our Help in Ages Past," fanfare, recitative, and hymn. have to say, embarrassingly perhaps, that piece chokes me up every time I hear it, whether I played it or not. That ending is just spectacular. I do hope that you'll take some time to wander onto our website and look through the works of these composers, because, you know, today was just a taste of what these folks have done. And the people are really putting out organ music that I just think it's extraordinary what they're pulling in on hymns that have been around for centuries, and yet we're creating new voices and new ways to use the organ and things that serve organists who serve worship services who have such varied needs. We have such an unusual job being a church organist because you have to fit so many different circumstances in so many different ways. And hopefully this gave you an idea of how Paraclete music can help you do that. At any rate, thank you again. I'm so grateful we had Lindsay's children here today. That makes this extra special, and they all know that because we've all chatted about this before. So thank you again for coming. Hope to see you then again next week when we'll have our guest Robert Lau on. But before we close, we now actually get to do our signature piece that we weren't able to do right at the beginning, a setting of the text, Thou, O God, art praised in Zion by Malcolm Boyle. Just a little quick history to that piece. Sir Malcolm Boyle, an Englishman, wrote that piece and left a manuscript that fell into the hands of Dr. George Guest. George Guest, who most of you probably realize many years, the organist, university organist of St. John's College, Cambridge, England. He sent that to us to publish in the late 1980s. It really had a technical American premiere at the AGO National Convention in 1990 in Boston, and has since, with no advertising, sold over 55,000 copies. The reason being, I think, in part, is that its theme is wonderfully uplifting praise. And so when you tune in through the various weeks, you'll hear this beforehand to introduce what we're doing on that day. So again, thank you very much. And here is Thou, O God, art praised in Zion. Hi, Rachel.
Hey, Jim. Thank you so much to everybody who joined us today. Thank you, Jim, for taking us through all of that incredible music.
Absolutely.
So many fabulous resources for everyone. And I hope everyone's been able to follow along with the links in the chat bar. And again, if not, don't worry. You'll be getting an email with an invitation to next week's talkback, all the information about today's music. So everything will be easily accessible for you. And also, just to let you know, in celebration of beginning these music talkback sessions, all organ music is 25% off. Just go to the website and have a look. It's paracletesheetmusic.com, and you can easily find the organ music from there. So we hope you enjoyed this time together as much as we did, and we hope you'll join us for more of these Paraclete music talkbacks every Thursday with Jim and our featured composers. The calendar for the future talkbacks is available on the same website, paracletesheetmusic.com. Our prayers are with all of you for health and safety. God bless, and we hope to see you next Thursday.
Take care.